Anna Kavoura is a researcher in gender studies, and she's also, specifically around martial arts and combat sport, she's also quite a high-level competitor in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. Hello, Anna, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, Paul. Thank you for having me.
So you are currently in transit, aren't you? You're from Greece. You were working and studying in Finland, and then ultimately you're trying to move to the UK during this period of lockdown and travel restrictions. And tell us a little bit about the situation.
Yeah, well, I just finished my work contract in Finland. I have been living and working here for some years now, and I am relocating to the UK. Actually, this has been my first week of working, being affiliated with the University of Brighton. I'm starting a new project, and this is like my first week on that. But yeah, I have been stuck between countries. I spent the lockdown in Greece. I came back to Finland 2 days ago to arrange the relocation, and I hope that I will make it to the UK by September. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, we've known each other for a while because you've been to almost all of the martial arts studies conferences, I think.
Not all, but I have been like in the first.
Yeah, and you definitely missed the Bruce Lee one.
Yeah, yeah, I did.
So the obvious question is why would you miss the Bruce Lee conference? But I won't ask you that. It's probably too personal. So your research is on issues around fighters' identity and experiences of power and gender relations and inclusivity in different kinds of combat sport environment. Tell us a little bit about the history of your research. And you were like a judo and jiu-jitsu competitor first, I guess, and then you decided to research issues around that. Would that be correct?
Yes. So yeah, it comes from personal experiences, I guess, my interest in gender. And actually, my background is not in gender studies. My background is in sports science, and in sports psychology in particular is my major. And when I got interested into gender issues, like I didn't know anything about gender theory. But my primary supervisor, Tatiana Riba, was brave enough and took me under her wings and introduced me to the theories. I guess she saw the motivation and the passion that I had about exploring these issues, because it was about my experiences and the questions that I had about why I have been very often the only woman in the class. Like, I mean, when I started martial arts 15 years ago, like it was always like we were just like a couple of women, or sometimes I was the only one, and I was wondering why. Why I find so much enjoyment in this and other women are not. And this is how I got interested in the topic. And then yeah, it has been a journey. Like since then, I have been researching gender for 10 years now.
So I guess the obvious question then is what were your initial conclusions about why you loved it? I guess, was your question like, did you think that if you just gave it a try that more women would like it, and what's stopping them from coming through the door? Or was it something that, why are some people culturally kind of put off by this and other people drawn to it? What kind of question was it? What was your hypothesis and what were your conclusions?
Yeah, well, in the beginning I thought that I wanted to explore the strategies that, let's say, successful female judo athletes, elite judo athletes, the strategies that they have employed in order to survive and succeed in martial arts, and that maybe we can learn something from these strategies. That was my idea initially, but then it came out that it was a lot about power dynamics, about gender stereotypes, gender hierarchies and discourses. And actually, like, it turned out that the women that have stayed in the martial arts for years and they have a successful competitive career, they were actually not resisting these discourses, but reproducing them.
Okay. Okay.
So this is how I ended, like, I looked also at cultural differences in Finland and in Greece, and there were like some differences, of course, like, for example, like the discourses of femininity are more rigid in Greece, what is supposed to be a, feminine women, and while this discourse is more flexible in Finland.
Okay.
But what was the same was this discourse of female biological inferiority, I call it in my PhD thesis,
Mm-hmm.
that by nature, men are better at this, while women are not, made to do martial arts. But then these successful athletes, they were kind of like saying that, yeah, normally women cannot do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was born different. Like, I was always a tomboy. I was born like this and like that, and I was.
Mm-hmm.
But normally women cannot do it.
Okay.
And this was like a very powerful discourse, like both in Finland and in Greece. Like, I was surprised that like almost all my participants mentioned this kind of version of the discourse. And to be honest, I remember myself when I started judo I was 17 years old, and I remember myself feeling like special, that there is something special. I am different from ordinary women because they are not here, and so this is a very powerful discourse.
Yes.
And
yeah.
This was like my PhD thesis, and then after that I started becoming more interested on issues of gender and sexuality, and actually how we can challenge these discourses, how we can resist and challenge this.
Okay, so it's a common thing, isn't it, to argue that fighters aren't made, they're born, and this kind of essentialist argument that you've either got it or you haven't, when in fact all of the evidence points to the fact that you become this thing by trying and by training and by being taught. I mean, some people might be aggressive, some people might be scared or whatever, but I mean, those same things might drive you to a dojo, right? You might be really aggressive and you want to be a fighter, or you might be really scared, or you might feel really unfit, and then you just get into it, and at that point people start saying, oh, they've got the fire, they've got the spark, they've got the essence. But it's not an essence, is it? It's just like an interest and a passion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So tell us about your I guess your competitive interest. I mean, is that still ongoing? Because there's a couple of things that I've been meaning to ask you about, actually. One is because they've always been intertwined, I know, and one time we were talking at an event in Britain, and you were complaining because you were badly injured and you couldn't seem to recover enough to train properly, and the doctor was telling you that your spine was damaged and you should quit, and you couldn't come to terms with that. And then the next time we talked, like a year or two later, you're saying, oh yeah, I'm going to go to the conference at Chapman University because there's also the World Jiu-Jitsu Championships or something, and I'll go to that as well. So what happened? You were injured, you were worried about your competitive career, and then you just how did you solve that problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the same story with all the athletes. I think it's not like special in my case, but yeah, I'm now 35 and I can feel the effects in my body. I have some problems with my spine and my lower back and my neck also, as you said, and some other minor injuries. And yeah, like I cannot train as much as I mean, martial, like judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu has always been a hobby for me. So I am not an elite athlete. It has been a hobby, but at some point it became a serious hobby, and I have been competing in some world championships and so on. And yeah, when I was younger, I was able to train twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And now I cannot really do it, but I am trying to find, let's say, smarter ways of training.
Yeah.
Like I had to change a little bit my game plan in order to adapt to my low back problems and stuff like that. And like I try to, as long as I enjoy competing.
Mm.
I'm kind
Okay,
of doing
okay.
it. Yeah.
So this thing about training smarter, I mean, are young people just headstrong and stupid, or do you think that you have the competitive advantage if you are physically and culturally and financially able to train 3 times a day? You know, I mean, what do you
Mm.
think happens? Is it injury that makes you look for smarter, or is it age, or like what makes someone go, I can't just train all the time? Um, you know, should people be training smarter anyway? Should younger people be training 4 times a week as opposed to 15 times a week?
Yeah, well, for me, it was injuries and age because I was this kind of person that, I thought that I don't need any warm up, like, let's just spar. And so I was this kind of person, and I wish I was smarter. And I wish it
Yeah.
was. But I don't know, I think it has a lot to do with the culture of the club, also with how you are taught by your instructors and so on.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I started doing Tai Chi, and there's a lot in Tai, Tai Chi is incredibly gentle anyway, but there's a lot of stuff where you're rolling your neck, and I was like, come on, let's just get through all this rubbish. But
Yeah,
now I'm like, I look forward to it. Well, I can spend hours doing this loosely
yeah.
because I'm in constant aches and pains. But okay, so you're moving to Brighton,
Mm.
and is your research and your post there, is that organised around martial arts, or is it around gender and sport participation, or
Mm.
what is the project?
Yeah, it's not focused on martial arts per se, but yeah, martial arts is going to be part of it. I don't know how it happens, and most of my participants in my data usually come from martial arts.
Hmm.
Yeah, but no, the project is about trans-inclusive sport contexts,
Okay.
and it is a ethnographic project. So yeah, as I said before, I like after my PhD, I became interested in how we can challenge these gender discourses and
Hmm.
this. And I became interested in the gender bodies and identities because they challenge our understandings of gender.
Okay.
And as one of my participants said in an interview, they have been quoting that since then, like it is like being trans in martial arts is like activism only by existing or in
Okay.
sports.
Yeah.
So I became interested in this and in how we can organize sport in non-binary ways.
Okay.
And this is like because I mean, like we start understanding now that this kind of practices of gender segregation or the gender categories in sport like cannot cater for the needs of all the people. So we start now realizing that there are some problems there with the rigid gender categories, but it is hard for all of us to imagine sport organized in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I am interested in these spaces that have been doing that,
Okay.
because there are these kind of spaces. There are, like queer sport spaces, or like I found many red gyms in the UK that they had a feminist and trans-inclusive policy, and they were organizing the trainings and even martial arts competition in a non-binary way.
Okay.
So I became interested in these kind of spaces.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, why is it such an issue? I mean, surely, I mean, martial arts, so any competitive sports, they're gendered. So, like, so there's men's and there's women's. That's not necessary, because the other categories surely are just to do with weight or height, or, why can't it just
Mm-hmm.
be a physical, like some kind of BMI based
Mm-hmm.
category? Like, why do you think people think that organizing things down binary lines is necessary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why exactly? Why? Yeah, well, there are many feminist scholars that have been wondering exactly the same, like why not height, why not something else, just weight. And they argue that this kind of obsession with the gender categories is just to protect the binary.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just about that. So
Yeah. It's like, you know, the whole debate about, and this seems to be a massive thing everywhere around, like, you know, transgender people and public toilets and public bathrooms. It's like, well, just change it so that you just have toilets, like you just have bathrooms. Like,
Mhm.
why do you have to have men's and women's? Why don't you? Because not everywhere does. It doesn't make any sense. It's like the entire organization, or like the entire separation of our conceptual
Mhm.
field seems to be organized around unnecessarily restrictive binaries. Like, that don't need to be there. They could just be toilets. They could just be weight divisions. They could just be age divisions. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
such a strange thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we're not going to solve this. We can help work things out, maybe, but you know, if we try. But the thing that is really interesting to me is, and I've talked to other people on this podcast as well about how do you get, I guess, non-cisgender or non-normative kind of like people, like identities. How do you get them in the door of a martial arts club? Like,
Mhm.
and how do you make that environment inclusive? Because I know that you've thought about both of these issues. So first of all, what kind of suggestions are there? Because it seems like the work has to start out there in culture somewhere, out there in representation, out there in publicity. How do
Mhm.
you make martial arts and combat sports attractive
Mhm.
to people with disabilities or trans people or people who feel that they will experience prejudice or something? How do you do that for a start? What kind of suggestions would you make there for people who want to have an inclusive dojo or an inclusive club?
Mhm.
What do you think, just off the top of your head, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think that you need to make an effort to kind of promote martial arts to I don't know another audience. I think that people are interested in
Mm-hmm.
martial arts or in the sports in general and so on. It's just that sometimes they don't feel safe in these spaces. So it's about like making the kind of dojo or your training like your academy safe for all.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe kind of like sometimes a small hint in your website that you are welcome as you are. We are open for all genders, all sexualities, all people of
Mm-hmm.
from all categories of difference. Like this can be enough to make the person to feel safe to come
Mm-hmm.
there. And then like problems that usually come out then in the training is like the gender language
Mm-hmm.
or some kind of practices of gender segregation, like even if the groups in martial arts, for example, the groups are not often segregated.
Mm-hmm.
We train together, but sometimes you end up saying, oh, like women do it this way and men do it this way, or women go. So these kind of practices are problematic and make
Yeah.
people feel uncomfortable. And of course, the locker rooms
Mm.
is an issue
Yeah.
too.
See, I wonder if it's a lot to do with class as well. I mean, because you could have some well-equipped plush gym dojo in a nice cosmopolitan area of a city or a town, and I think that people would like more people uh, of different ethnic groups,
Mm-hmm.
different sexualities, different kinds of cultural identities. They'll be more prepared to walk into that because it looks safe. It'll feel like a cafe or somewhere that you would just walk, or a department store that feels nice, safe. But there are other clubs that are necessarily more kind of grotty, like somewhere like a real rough gym, like real rough neighborhood, and that's probably not, it's not going to feel like a safer space to anyone. I mean, I'm kind of middle class, middle-aged white man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I come from a working class environment, and I'm drawn. I'm like a class tourist. Like, I want my gyms to be rough and ready. I want to go somewhere where people are swearing and using foul language, because to me there's a kind of nostalgia there, and I feel fine walking through that door, no matter how rough and tough the people are. But I guess that's going to be incredibly off-putting for women or people of non-white or non-straight identities. I mean, do you think that class and kind of cosmopolitanism factors into this as well?
Yeah, I think there are intersections between class and gender, or our perceptions of gender, of course. Like, I wouldn't, I don't know, I haven't researched this, but I would be hesitant to say that, like upper class white jeans are safer necessarily for like, but yeah, like class and gender are definitely intersected, and I think we lack research on this topic. So this is like an important topic to be investigated in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Because you think about the status of things like yoga, right? Like yoga is kind of which we all know more about now since lockdown, right? Because we've all gone, what can we do on our own? That's maybe a little bit like jujitsu or something, and we learn more about yoga. That's been gendered well, it's been classed and gendered, hasn't it? It becomes a middle class sort of non-competitive thing. A lot of the scholarship that I've read about yoga is that it was sort of ideally placed for kind of middle class women. And I'm just wondering whether maybe certain types of martial art and combat sports practice and location are inherently more inclusive. Obviously, within the dojo, this is the next question, within the club, you could walk into the most plush and kind of cosmopolitan environment and still encounter these rigid patriarchal or homophobic structures, right? And that's probably down to the teachers.
Yeah.
Or are there, or is it like you suggested, it might be within the design of the place? Like if there's only one changing area or no changing area, if there's only one toilet or no toilet, or I mean, what do you think about the gendered and patriarchal or heteronormative structures that you encounter within inside a space? Is that to do with people or to do with the layout of the place or what?
Yeah, I mean the culture of the space. That of course it has to do a lot with the instructors, because they are role models in there on what kind of behavior is accepted or what kind of behavior is not accepted in the space. But yeah, it's the culture of the gym, and usually it kind of like has elements from the kind of more broader culture of the martial art, the culture of the national culture, the culture of the origins of these martial arts. So it's a mixture of things, I think.
So you don't think that any particular physical practice is inherently either emancipatory or progressive or regressive or sexist, or it's all to do with this complex kind of force field of factors, like the hierarchies, how they work, and the way that people speak to each other, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now I am getting also interested in the intersection with political identities. You mentioned race as one factor, but now I am getting interested with the intersection of political identities with gender and the inclusion of like gender and sexual identities in the training, like because like yeah, for example, I found the red gyms in the UK to be very like loudly inclusive, having visible feminist policies and so on. So that's another thing that could be investigated. Like,
okay, so I mean, there's a line of thinking. If you look at the work of people like Ben Spatz, but there's a long tradition of people who have really argued that, or Martha McCoy, or lots of people who argue that gender is really produced through technologies that teach us how to move and how to behave. So like the whole thing about throwing like a girl, because girls society doesn't encourage them to, and so on. It's just like an image of girls aren't taught to throw, so they can't throw, whereas young boys and young men are taught to put their whole body into a movement. And so is there not something that deconstructs gender binaries just by virtue of, so if anyone walks into a boxing gym, if anyone learns how to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, male or female, young or old, that is a kind of inherently gender egalitarian thing? I mean, do you not, because I think that there's that learning self-defense and learning to fight, for my daughters, I think it's a sort of an important feminist project. But I totally buy Martha McCoy's argument about physical feminism, and that it shouldn't just be boys who are taught to fight or who learn how to fight. So is there something inherently transformative of gender that's within, say, MMA or BJJ or boxing or judo, or not? Or is it?
Yeah, definitely. And Alex Channon has written about that, and many other scholars about the potential of martial arts training just to this emancipatory potential, and how, like, our perceptions of what the female body can do and cannot do can be challenged in martial arts training. So yeah, many scholars have written about that, and but I mean, on the other side, it's not, I don't think that, like, just by training martial arts in a mixed group, like, the change is gonna, like, I think we need to reflect a little bit more on issues, because there are still, like, certain dynamics that can be created even in a mixed gender martial arts group.
There's different ways of talking about yourself and talking about your abilities. But like, I'm thinking about one time we were sitting talking with our mutual colleague, Catherine Phipps, who's got masses of combat experience, masses of competition experience. And she told the story, she went to a new gym, and she just kept using the expression, yes, I've been in the ring before, or something like that, or yeah, I've got some experience of this. And they were really, really patronizing to her, because she should have just said, I've been in, like, if it was a man, there would be no modesty. They'd be like, yes, I fought so-and-so and I won this title and I did this. But she was like, yeah, I have some experience of this. And then when she actually threw a couple of punches and a couple of kicks, they were like, wow. She said, well, yes, as I said, I have some. And then she talked about it in a really self-deprecating, modest manner, which maybe there's something about the way that people speak in a gender difference there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. I think that there are lots of things going on, and just training cannot bring the change. Of course, certain things are changing with time, and with, more women are now training martial arts than before, and there are changes happening. But still, like, we need to reflect more about, like what you mentioned, the way that we talk, like how we perform, our identities, and so on, how we continue to reproduce certain discourses.
So you think it has to be a conscious decision on the part of people who are involved in these environments and these practices? Like, you have to maybe make a conscious decision to be professional, to be egalitarian, to be progressive, to undertake some kind of inclusive consciousness training, maybe unconscious bias type training. Do you think that would be a good thing for all teachers and coaches?
I think we need education on these topics, because many people want to be, to create this, to facilitate these inclusive spaces and so on, but like, how to do this, it's not included in the martial arts instructor training. So I think we need, like, education for instructors and all the people involved in sports and martial arts, because we don't always recognize what kind of discourses we reproduce or we resist with the things we organize, the way we organize a training, or the things we say, or the way we perform our identity.
I see. So what are your next, I mean, in terms of, not in terms of your employment, but in terms of your research and writing about martial arts specifically, what are the next questions that you'll be looking at? You mentioned political identities. Are you looking at that specifically, or what are your plans?
Yeah, this is in my plans, actually. This is in my plans. As I said, I mean, the project is broader, so it's about trans inclusive sport context, and I am going to be collecting ethnographic data from a variety of sports and a variety of like queer sports spaces and so on. But like I think one of the spaces that I want to collect data is like the red martial arts teams in the UK that have a trans-inclusive policy.
Okay.
And to look at this intersection with gender issues, trans issues, and political identities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that there's a lot more people who are looking specifically at the connections between martial arts clubs or associations and explicit politics. I mean, there have been a lot of debates about various sort of MMA clubs and white nationalism and racism and so on. I mean, do you think that maybe martial arts are becoming politicized? Do you think that they're becoming like explicitly political subcultures or groups, or what do you think the dynamics are there?
I don't know, like I am, like maybe I can talk more about it in a conference in the future, because now I haven't collected the data, so I am just like, it's just in my plans. So, but maybe they always were. Maybe they always were martial arts, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they probably always were. I mean, I just, all the stuff about, there were articles a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, about like MMA and fascist fight clubs, and there was a debate about it, and the idea of MMA clubs becoming recruiting grounds for the alt-right and neo-fascist clubs and everything. And a thought that really made me chuckle, I mean, it made me laugh, was like, so if, let's say we agree that MMA is really good for like for violence or for handling yourself, what's better than MMA? Okay, Krav Maga. Wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't there be a massive irony if like a load of like white supremacists start into Krav Maga? I mean, it could happen. Why would it not happen? Why would it not happen?
Yeah.
Like, Krav Maga, that's so aligned with a kind of Israeli Jewish history. It's got that Jewish narrative. There would be a terrible irony in these right-wing neo-Nazis turning to Krav Maga, wouldn't there? But they've done worse in the past. So this is just an aside. This is just
maybe in a future conference, martial arts conference, we can.
Well, I think that we should. I mean, I think it needs to be
discuss more about political identities and.
Political. I mean, the political dynamics of martial arts. I mean, it's almost like you look. There's a large period of nationalism, wasn't there? I mean, throughout the 20th century, martial arts were associated with nationalism and Orientalism and fantasies about the other. But they become privatized now, and they become fragmented, and they can be. Sometimes like they can be anything. And one question I have is like, is there something like inherently, say, non-violent or the lesser violent about something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Because it seems to. It's not about smashing people's faces in. It's something that there's a feminism to it, in the sense that if a woman is to be attacked by a man, it's highly likely to be a sexual or some kind of like domineering, controlling attack. And if that woman is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, then she stands an infinitely better chance of being able to defeat and control that man. And you start thinking there's something kind of feminist. It has a feminist potential there, right? In a way that other arts don't.
Yeah, it has been promoted sometimes as like that, as a like a good self-defense method especially for women.
Yeah.
So and I can see that it can be like more useful, like in that sense, particularly for women. But to be honest, like this was not the reason that I started.
Okay, like, what was the reason? Was it judo first and then jiu-jitsu? Or
yeah. And I think what kept me in the sport was like the thrill of the sparring and the thrill of the competition, the excitement and so on. And like I have been always doing this as a I have been focused on the sport side of judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and not on the self-defense, but like of course, there was also something that maybe I was like, as a child, I was feeling a little bit vulnerable, and I wanted to become this kind of strong person that can defend myself. So there was something, a drive, like kind of self-defense drive in that sense. But I found this sense of empowerment in the sparring and the competition, and not, you know, in learning martial arts like just for self-defense.
Yeah. I think that's a classic sort of sociological argument about sports, isn't it? It kind of sublimates certain energies and contributes to the building of character and in different ways. I guess, yeah, I never pursued the competitive line of anything, and maybe I should have. Because then you would just, there's a truth, isn't there? There's a truth and honesty in sparring. Eh? You go, well, these are the parameters, these are the rules. No eye gouging, no biting or whatever. But you know with certainty that you beat someone who is trying to beat you, and the more you do that, there's more of a confirmation that this is not just like that you are tough, that you can prevail. Whereas a lot of martial arts, there's a kind of, especially if they just focus on self-defense. Sorry, I'm laughing because my instructor was telling me about a guy who came to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because he wanted to work out. He'd been doing some ultra self-defense stuff. He said, but it's all over in 1 second. But I want to lose weight and I want to get fit. It's not just about like stamping on someone's knee and gouging their eye out. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, like, I don't know, like I think it differs for different people. I mean, like different things and so on. But for me, it was like in sparring and in competition, you get this experience of like having to try your martial arts skill, I guess, in an unpredictable opponent that also really wants to kind of dominate you or something.
Yeah.
So you have this sort of experience. While sometimes the self-defense classes that I have, you know, participated, like it was more like a choreography.
Yeah.
And at least for me, it was not giving me the same thrill or the same like kind of confidence in myself at the end of the day. And but I think it's like different people like different things, and it is what suits you best.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, that's very true. I wonder if we could connect that into questions about some of the theoretical propositions about why people turn to certain martial arts. I wonder if there's a way that we could kind of ethnographically verify any of that stuff, or if it's always going to be more complex and more individually subjective than any theoretical model could predict.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I have interviewed, like, the focus of my research was not like the reasons why women do martial arts, but it was always, you know, one of my questions. And I have interviewed more than 40 women, I think, and like maybe one of them or two mentioned like self-defense.
Okay.
So of course I was like also like interviewing athletes, so it was my sample was like consisted from this type of people, but I usually mentioned like things like you know, doing something like bringing themselves to their limits, like reaching their limits, their potential, and this thrill that you get from competition. And
I think a lot of the stuff about either the theory or the statements that people make or the research questions that they ask about why do you do this, I think that they miss something really important, which is that we're not consciously necessarily in control of why we do what we do. So, you know, like maybe how many people start to do martial arts simply because their parents took them to martial arts? Like, you know, if you ask, you know, like why, if you ask my daughter why she does ballet, she could come out with all sorts. The truth is there was a ballet class, and we
Mhm.
took her to it when she was 4. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
that's like, and something about it stuck. So maybe we're not, maybe it's a bit like, asking me why I put my glasses on with my left hand. It's like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just that's just the way it happens, right? I mean, what do you think about that kind of? You don't really you don't ask fundamental why questions like
Mhm.
motivation. I guess you're asking like what keeps you going, what's the thrill,
Yeah.
or what's the yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about that kind of interview method for getting to the fundamentals of like an actual originary why? Can it do that? Do you think?
Well, I think that the point is not to get to the true why. I don't think there is such a thing, but you look at the narrative, I think, and the narrative matters. Like, I
Yeah.
have been, like, in my research, I have been interested in the discourses that people draw when they talk about, like,
Yeah.
martial arts and why they did it. So, this is what I was interested. But yeah, like, the narrative changes over the years. And I think that if you asked me, like, 10 years ago, like how come like I would maybe give a different answer,
Mm.
that like, so the narrative changes, but I think it matters in research, like how
Yeah.
we make these stories, and like
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. Yeah, my narratives change. I don't know. I don't know if I'm the only person in the world who does this, but I'm constantly in dialogue with my 16-year-old self, because my 16-year-old self was such an obsessive, arrogant, dismissive person, and I would look at older people and go, "You don't want to be like that." So there's still part of me that goes, are you happy with this? Like, I'm still lifting weights, I'm still punching punch bags, I'm still. Have I let you down? Have I
Mhm.
let you down? It's ridiculous. I know I'm not in some kind of conversation with like some Oedipal father or superego. I'm just like my 16-year-old self who had all these grand ambitions. Yeah, I mean, do you find that? I mean, have you looked at much sort of psychoanalytic stuff about like, or is this that not relevant? Like people's relationships with their parents and their role models and their cultural desires, or is it just that doesn't it's not relevant to your work?
No, I haven't looked into that in my work, but I mean, I have been, sometimes wondering, like, about my voices in my head and the conversations that happen in my head, and there are voices of different ages there, so
Yeah.
yeah.
There is an older voice. There is an older me as well. That you kind of think, oh, I can't be bothered to do any yoga today. And there's the older me going, oh yeah, you can. And
Yeah.
then here I am. I can't walk and I can barely fasten my shoelaces. You should have done yoga that day, and you should never stop. So yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're in Finland now. You're going back to you're flying, and you're struggling to do this kind of international movement.
Yeah.
And we will hopefully see you in the UK from September 2020. For how long? Is it a permanent
For
post
two
or?
years. It's
Oh,
for 2 years, and the
okay.
project is funded by the Finnish Cultural Foundation.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they are, uh, funding research abroad that also speaks to the Finnish scientific community.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna be, yeah, in the University of Brighton for 2 years.
Well, that's great, and
Yeah,
we'll have to see you either there or in Cardiff.
yeah, definitely.
We'll when we can move around again, that'll be great. I look forward to seeing you. But Anna Kavoura, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and I hope that your travel plans work out really well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.